I spent 7 years building my interior design business from nothing. Countless sleepless nights, every penny of my savings, and endless sacrifices transformed my garage workshop into a thriving company worth over $2 million. When I met Lisa at my studio opening, everything clicked. She understood my entrepreneurial drive, supported my vision, and after 2 years together, she said yes to my proposal. Life was perfect until we started planning the wedding. That's when Lisa dropped the bombshell. Her parents expected me to gift them 30% of my business as a condition of our marriage. When I hesitated, her smile vanished. Before I tell you what happened when I said no, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that like button if you believe your business should always remain yours to control. Subscribe if you want more stories about standing your ground when faced with impossible choices. To understand why Lisa's demand felt like such a betrayal, you need to know what went into building my company. I started Kohl's Custom Interiors at 28, working out of my parents' garage with just a table saw, some basic tools, and a design degree. Those first years were brutal. I worked my regular job at an architecture firm during the day and built custom furniture pieces at night, often until 3 or 4 in the morning. My social life disappeared. My savings account drained to zero, and I even maxed out 2 credit cards to buy better equipment. The turning point came after 18 months, when a local magazine featured one of my custom entertainment centers. Orders started flowing in enough that I could quit my day job and focus entirely on my business. But that just meant working even longer hours. I remember going 3 days straight, on nothing but energy drinks, and determination to finish a major restaurant installation on deadline. For 3 years, I paid myself barely enough to cover rent and ramen noodles, pouring every other penny back into the business. I moved from my parents' garage to a small warehouse, then to a proper studio space downtown. Each expansion meant more debt, more stress, and more sleepless nights, wondering if I had overextended myself. By year 5, I had 10 employees, a reputation for exceptional craftsmanship, and finally, a salary that reflected my position. When I opened my second location 2 years ago, the mayor even showed up for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Today, Kohl's Custom Interiors employs 15 people, has 2 showrooms, and is valued at roughly $2.5 million, according to my last business valuation. I met Lisa at that second location opening. She worked in marketing for a local real estate developer who had partnered with us on several projects. Lisa stood out immediately, not just because of her striking green eyes or contagious laugh, but because she actually understood what building this business meant. Unlike previous girlfriends who saw my work hours as an inconvenience, Lisa recognized them as necessary dedication. Most people see a beautiful piece of furniture, she told me that night, as we admired a walnut dining table I had designed. I see the hours of planning, the failed attempts, and the persistence it took to make this. That's what makes it special. Those words cemented my interest in her. Over dinner the following week, I learned she had built her own marketing career from an entry-level position, refusing family connections that could have accelerated her path. She valued earned success, just as I did. Our relationship progressed naturally. We shared similar values about hard work, financial responsibility, and building a meaningful future. Lisa understood when I needed to cancel plans because of a client emergency, and I respected her dedication to her own career. After 2 years of dating, proposing felt like the most natural decision I had ever made. She said yes over a sunset dinner at the mountain lodge where we had spent our first weekend together. I had met Lisa's parents, Harold and Margaret, several times before the engagement. They lived in an impressive colonial-style house in the wealthiest suburb of our city. Harold had made his fortune in commercial real estate development, while Margaret managed their substantial investment portfolio. They always treated me with political correctness, but I sensed reservation behind their polite smiles. "Kohl has quite the little business," Harold once remarked to another guest at their anniversary party, his emphasis on little not lost on me. Margaret was more subtle, but equally calculating. Lisa's sister married into the Wilson family. She mentioned during one dinner, referring to the owners of the largest car dealership chain in the state. And her cousin Elizabeth married a Harrington, They just bought that lovely vacation home in Aspen. The message was clear. They measured worth in dollars and family connections. Despite my growing success, I was still viewed as somehow lacking compared to their other in-laws. Lisa would always defend me after these encounters, insisting her parents just needed time to see what she saw in me. I believed her because I wanted to, because I loved her, and because I thought our shared values were stronger than her family's materialistic measuring stick. 6 months after our engagement, wedding planning was in full swing. Lisa had booked a historic mansion for the ceremony-selected flowers that cost more than my first car, and chosen a guest list of 300 people, many of whom I had never met. Her parents had offered to pay for roughly half of the expenses, which I appreciated given the lavish nature of what was being planned. Meanwhile, I was in the middle of negotiating a significant business expansion. A retail chain had approached me about designing a custom furniture line that would be sold in their stores nationwide. The opportunity could double my company's value, but required substantial upfront investment. My focus was split between wedding details and business projections, both demanding time and money I was stretching to provide. In retrospect, the timing could not have been worse, when Harold called to invite me to dinner at their home to discuss some wedding matters. Lisa mentioned she had a previous commitment, but insisted I should go without her. "Dad really wants to talk to you man to man," she explained, kissing me on the cheek. "I think he's finally warming up to you." The dinner started pleasantly enough. Margaret had prepared her famous roast beef, and Harold opened an expensive bottle of whiskey for after-dinner drinks. The conversation stayed on safe topics through the main course, sports weather, and Harold's recent golf trip. It wasn't until Margaret brought out dessert that Harold cleared his throat and shifted the conversation. "Cole, you've built quite an impressive business," he began, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Lisa has kept us updated on your recent successes. This potential retail deal sounds particularly promising." I thanked him, pleased at what seemed like genuine recognition. "Family is everything to us," Margaret interjected, placing a slice of chocolate cake in front of me. "We have always taken care of Lisa and want to ensure her future is secure." Harold nodded in agreement. "Which brings us to what I wanted to discuss tonight. As you know, in our family, we believe in proper arrangements before marriages take place." The shift in his tone put me on alert, but I maintained a polite smile. "I'm happy to discuss a prenuptial agreement, if that's your concern," I offered. "My lawyer has actually suggested the same thing to protect both Lisa and myself." Harold waved his hand dismissively. "A prenup is standard, of course, but I'm talking about something more significant, a family arrangement." He took a long sip of his whiskey before continuing. "We would like you to gift 30% ownership of your company to Margaret and myself before the wedding. As a show of commitment to Lisa and integration into our family." I nearly choked on my cake. "I'm sorry, what?" "It's quite common in successful families," Margaret added, as if explaining something obvious. "Lisa's sister's husband signed over shares in his medical practice, and her cousin's husband did the same with his financial consulting firm." Harold leaned forward. "We would be silent partners, of course. This is simply about securing Lisa's future and bringing our families together in all aspects, including business." My mind raced to make sense of this request. 30% of my company would be worth roughly $750,000, far more than the $100,000 they were contributing to the wedding. More importantly, it would mean giving up controlling interest in the business I had built from nothing. "I appreciate your concern for Lisa's future," I said carefully, setting down my fork. "But my business is separate from our marriage. It's my life's work and primary income source. I'm not comfortable giving up ownership to anyone." Harold's expression hardened. "We're not just anyone, Cole. We're going to be family, and families share their successes." With all due respect, I countered, "I'm happy to provide for Lisa through our marriage, and I'm willing to discuss fair terms in a prenuptial agreement. But my company remains mine." "This isn't really negotiable," Harold stated flatly. "It's a tradition in our family, a matter of trust and commitment." A tradition Lisa never mentioned in 2 years of dating. I pointed out, feeling a growing unease. The conversation continued to deteriorate, as Harold pressed the issue, outlining how their involvement could benefit my business through connections and capital. What he described sounded less like a gift, and more like a hostile takeover wrapped in family obligation. "I think I should discuss this with Lisa," I finally said, standing to leave. "She's fully aware and in agreement," Margaret replied coolly. "Why do you think she arranged for you to meet with us alone tonight?" That revelation hit me like a physical blow. I thanked them stiffly for dinner and drove home in a daze, my mind reeling from what had just transpired. When I arrived at my apartment, Lisa was waiting. Her nervous expression confirmed what Margaret had implied. She had known exactly what her parents would demand. "They just want to protect me," she began before I could speak. "It's how our family does things. By taking a third of my company, something you never once mentioned in 2 years together." The hurt in my voice was evident. "I knew you wouldn't understand right away," she said. "But this is important to them, which makes it important to me. It's how we show commitment in my family." "I showed commitment with this," I replied, pointing to her engagement ring. "I show it every day, in how I treat you, how I plan our future together. That has nothing to do with signing over my business to your parents." Lisa's expression hardened in a way I had never seen before. "If you're serious about marrying me, you'll do this. It's that simple." She gathered her purse and headed for the door. "Talk to your lawyer if you need to, but this is how it has to be." As the door closed behind her, I sat alone in my apartment, wondering how the woman I thought I knew could have hidden such an expectation, and how I could possibly move forward with someone who viewed my life's work as a bargaining chip. The next week was a blur of unanswered calls, tense text messages, and sleepless nights. Lisa alternated between emotional appeals and cold ultimatums. "If you really loved me, you would do this," became her mantra, followed closely by, "My family will never accept you if you refuse." I reached out to my closest friend Daniel, who had known me since college, and watched me build my company from scratch. Over beers at my apartment, I explained the situation. "That's not a marriage proposal anymore," he said bluntly. "That's a business acquisition with a bride thrown in as a signing bonus." His assessment was harsh but clarifying. Still, I needed professional advice before making any decisions. I scheduled an appointment with Elaine, my business attorney, who had helped me navigate contracts and expansions over the years. Elaine's response was immediate and unequivocal. "This is predatory," she stated after reviewing the terms Harold had outlined in an email sent after our dinner. "They're not asking for a gift, they're positioning for control. If you sign this and later divorce, you could lose your company entirely." "How is that possible?" I asked, alarmed at her assessment. "These terms include voting rights that align with Margaret and Harold, creating a controlling block. There's also language about mandatory buy-sell agreements that could force liquidation under certain circumstances." She pushed her glasses up her nose. "This is a trap, Cole. A sophisticated one, but a trap nonetheless." Armed with this knowledge, I arranged to meet Lisa at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown where we had spent many Sunday mornings early in our relationship. The familiar setting did nothing to ease the tension between us. "My lawyer reviewed what your father proposed," I began after we had settled at a corner table. "It's not reasonable, Lisa. It's not about family or tradition. It's about control." Lisa stirred her untouched latte. "You just don't understand our family dynamics. Dad has always protected us this way." "Protected you? Or controlled you?" I challenged. "Because from where I'm sitting, this looks like him using your marriage as leverage to acquire a stake in a profitable business." Her cheeks flushed. "That's insulting. My father is a successful businessman who doesn't need your little company. This is about making sure I'm taken care of. I'm the one who will take care of you as your husband," I insisted. "Not by signing over my company to your parents, but by continuing to build our life together. Dad has big plans that could help expand your business," she countered, leaning forward. "He has connections you couldn't access on your own." That comment triggered something in me. Plans. What plans does your father have for my company that I don't know about? Lisa's hesitation told me I had stumbled onto something important. Just general growth strategies. She backpedaled. His expertise could really benefit you. This is the first I'm hearing about any plans. Why hasn't he discussed these directly with me? Why hasn't he proposed a proper investment or partnership if he sees value in collaboration? She had no satisfactory answer, which prompted me to ask the question that had been gnawing at me. How long have you known this would be expected of me? Her silence was damning. Did you know? Before we got engaged, I pressed. Yes, she finally admitted. But I knew if I brought it up too early, you would overreact exactly like you're doing now. The admission that our entire engagement had been built on this hidden expectation felt like a betrayal deeper than the demand itself. As our conversation grew more heated, I realized I needed to understand more about this family tradition. That evening, I did something I'm not proud of. I used Lisa's laptop, which she had left at my apartment, to search her emails for correspondence about her sisters' and cousins' husbands, the other men who had apparently complied with Harold's tradition. What I discovered was disturbing. Lisa's brother-in-law had indeed transferred 40% of his medical practice to Harold 5 years ago. Within 2 years of the marriage, Harold had leveraged his position to force a merger with a larger healthcare group, essentially pushing the brother-in-law out of decision-making. Lisa's cousin's husband had faced a similar fate, losing operational control of his consulting firm when Harold orchestrated a sale to a competitor. Most tellingly, I found emails from 6 months earlier between Lisa and her father discussing my business potential and the ideal timing to introduce the ownership transfer request. They had been planning this before I even proposed. Armed with this information, I requested another meeting with Lisa. This time, I chose my office after hours, where I felt more grounded. I know what happened to the other businesses, I stated, as soon as she arrived. To your sister's husband's practice and your cousin's husband's firm. Your father didn't just take ownership, he took control, and then essentially forced them out. Lisa's expression shifted from surprise to defiance. Those were completely different situations. They weren't running their businesses effectively. Dad stepped in to maximize value for everyone, and both marriages conveniently ended shortly after the businesses were restructured, I noted. With your sister and cousin retaining their shares through the divorce settlements. She shrugged. That's just smart business planning. In that moment, I saw Lisa clearly, for perhaps the first time. The woman I had fallen in love with, who I thought shared my values of hard work and integrity, was revealed as someone who viewed relationships through the lens of financial strategy. I won't do it, I said firmly. I won't sign over any portion of my company to your parents. Not 30%, not 5%, not 1%. Lisa's face hardened. Then I guess we have nothing left to discuss. She pulled off her engagement ring and placed it on my desk with a finality that echoed in the quiet office. I can't marry someone who won't be part of our family traditions, who clearly doesn't trust my father's business expertise. And I can't marry someone who hid such a significant expectation. I replied, my voice steady, despite the pain tearing through my chest. Someone who values family control over honest partnership. As she walked out of my office and my life, I felt both heartbroken and paradoxically relieved. I had lost the future I had imagined, but perhaps saved the one I had worked so hard to build. The fallout was immediate and messy. Canceling a wedding 6 weeks before the date meant lost deposits, awkward explanations to guests, and returning gifts that had already arrived. Friends and family members took sides, with many assuming I must have done something terrible for such a sudden breakup. Lisa wasted no time in controlling the narrative. According to mutual friends, she described me as financially controlling and unwilling to compromise for our future. Some people who had known me for years began to look at me differently, wondering if there was truth to her claims. Meanwhile, I struggled to focus on work during one of the most critical periods for my business. The retail contract negotiations stalled as my attention wavered, and I found myself making errors in design specifications that my team had to scramble to correct. For the first time since starting my company, I questioned my ability to lead it effectively. About 3 weeks after our breakup, I received a call from one of my largest clients. a luxury hotel developer who had contracted us for custom furniture for their new property. "Cole, I just had a strange meeting," he began without preamble. "Harold Warner asked me to lunch to discuss moving their business to my competitor, suggesting your company might not be financially stable enough to complete our contract." My blood ran cold. "That's absolutely false," I assured him. "We're on schedule and on budget for your project." "I figured as much," the client replied, "but thought you should know someone's trying to damage your reputation." This wasn't an isolated incident. 2 other clients reported similar conversations, and a supplier mentioned hearing rumors about payment issues with my company, none of which were true. It became clear that Harold was systematically attempting to undermine my business relationships. The final confirmation came when a business broker contacted me, claiming to represent an interested buyer for my company, who was willing to offer a fair price given the current challenges. The description of the buyer matched a holding company I knew Harold controlled. Rather than panic, I took decisive action. I hired Elaine, my business attorney, to send a strongly worded cease and desist letter to Harold, documenting the pattern of interference and threatening legal action for tortious business interference. I personally contacted each of my major clients to reassure them of my company's financial health and our commitment to their projects. I increased security on my business accounts and files, and instructed employees to report any unusual contacts or inquiries. Most importantly, I refocused on the retail contract negotiations with renewed determination. If Harold wanted to attack my business, I would respond by making it stronger and more successful than ever. 6 weeks later, I signed the retail contract, securing the largest deal in my company's history. The announcement made the business section of our local newspaper, complete with a photo of me shaking hands with the retail chain's CEO. I made sure to have several copies delivered to Harold's office with no note attached. The message was clear. His attempts to damage my business had failed. The personal recovery took longer than the professional one. Losing Lisa meant reimagining my entire future, one I had been certain would include her. I went through the stages of grief in unpredictable waves, sometimes feeling confident in my decision, other times questioning if I had overreacted to what might have been a negotiable situation. These doubts led me to join a business owners support group, where I met others who had faced similar pressures from family members or partners. Their stories reinforced that I had made the right choice, that sacrificing control of my company would have eventually destroyed both my business and any chance at a healthy marriage. Gary, a restaurant owner in his 60s, pulled me aside after one meeting. "My first wife's father was just like your ex's dad," he shared. "I gave in because I thought it was temporary, just to keep peace in the family. Ended up spending 15 years fighting for every business decision until the divorce finally freed me. But by then the restaurant was a shadow of what it could have been." His experience and similar stories from others helped solidify my resolve. I began to see the breakup not as a failure, but as a narrow escape. Physically, I threw myself into renovation projects at home, tearing out the kitchen Lisa had planned to remodel after our wedding and creating something entirely different. Every swing of the sledgehammer felt therapeutic, every new fixture, a declaration of independence. At work, the retail partnership energized my entire team. We developed new designs, streamlined production, and hired additional staff to meet the increased demand. Within 6 months of what would have been my wedding date, company revenue had increased by 60%. There was a brief moment of weakness when Lisa reached out asking to meet for coffee to clear the air. I declined, having learned from mutual friends that her father's attempt to acquire my company through pressure had failed, and he was now exploring a new approach through reconciliation. The patterns were too clear to ignore. Instead, I put my energy into both personal and professional growth. I took a woodworking masterclass in Italy, something I had always wanted to do but had postponed due to relationship commitments. I mentored a young designer who reminded me of myself 10 years earlier. I even began cautiously dating again, though, with much clearer boundaries and expectations. About 18 months after the broken engagement, I met Jessica at a charity auction where I had donated a custom dining set. As a successful architect with her own firm, she understood the dedication required to build something meaningful. Our relationship developed slowly and authentically, with open discussions about finances, family dynamics, and expectations from the very beginning. When she asked about my previous engagement, I shared the full story, including the painful lessons learned. Her response told me everything I needed to know about her character. "Your business is part of who you are," she said. "Anyone who asks you to compromise that fundamental piece of yourself doesn't truly love you. They love who they want you to become." 2 years after what could have been the biggest mistake of my life, I found myself leading a company valued at over $4 million in a relationship built on mutual respect, and finally free from the shadows of manipulation that had nearly cost me everything I had worked for. Sometimes the most painful decisions protect us from even greater pain down the road. What's one time you had to say no to someone you loved, to stay true to yourself? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about standing firm when it matters most. Hit the share button if you know someone who might be facing a similar crossroads right now. Thank you for listening. And remember, your principles might cost you relationships, but they preserve your integrity, and that's something no one can take from you unless you give it away.